All right, it's almost there. Just another moment. All right. We should be all set now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The June 2021 meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee is to begin. With that, I will call the meeting to order and ask for a motion on the adoption of the agenda.
So moved. There's some feedback there. Just FYI.
Second.
It's open. That is. I can't go down any further. I'm below the green. Is it right? Is it on that? Okay, that's better.
So did I get a motion? I know I did. Did I get a second on the agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can I also, if you had an opportunity to
Todd,
review the minutes,
can you put the mic closer to her mouth? They can't hear her.
Additions or changes to the minutes? No, did not, entertain a motion. Entertain a motion to adopt the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So the first information item on the agenda is the spring 2021 bond appreciation. Don, do we have some yes?
We do. So a few weeks ago, the district issued bonds for the annual spring ban. So this is to update the committee on the results of those sales. So we have online to do that. Carol Clark, which is a bond attorney, the district bond attorney, and David Moore. So I'll turn it over to Carol and David.
Don, hi, this is Carol Clark. I'm here, but I'm having trouble hearing you. And I think David is on as well, David Moore.
Right. I'm on.
Thanks. David, can you hear me?
I can barely, I don't know about Carol, I can barely hear you, Don. You want us to give a, can you hear us?
What about now?
That's a little better.
That's better.
Okay.
I'll keep the volume down in here so you can speak louder into
All right, thank you.
mics, okay?
If you'd like, Carol could give you the background on the multiple deals that were done, and I can just give a little comment on interest rates. Is that what you're looking for, Don?
That's good.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Just if you recall, I believe we brought the bond anticipation notes to you in your March meeting, and we had a very successful sale, which David will go into more detail on at the end of April 28th. And then we closed these 4 issues on May 12th. And this year was a little bit different from years past because we had 4 separate bond anticipation note issues. We had Series A, which was right around $64.5 million. And that Series A was used to fund the fixed cost of ownership, $10 million in capital maintenance, some land acquisition for District 2, and also make the June 1st installment payments on the tax-exempt IPRBs, which were issued in 2013 and 2014. Then we had Series B, which was in connection with the current sales tax program, the Phase 4 sales tax program. And that issue was just, let's see, 134 million, almost 135 million. there was no new money involved there. That was simply to retire the 2020B bond anticipation note. Then we had a Series C in the amount of $14.5 million, which was to fund the early out projects for the next sales tax program, the Phase 5 program, which will begin collection upon the expiration of Phase 4 at the beginning of 2023. And then finally, for the first time, we had a very small Series D, which was about 1.3 million. And that was to fund the interest due on June 1st on the taxable IPRB that we issued in October of last year. And since those 2020 IPRB bonds were issued as taxable under the tax law, we were required to do this separate series bond anticipation note as a taxable issue. So that was sort of what we were working through there. I think in the aggregate, though, we were only borrowing about the same amount that we borrowed in 2020. And the reason for that is that $30 million of Phase 4 sales tax collections were used to pay down a portion of the principal and interest coming due on the 2020B bond anticipation notes. So unless anybody has any questions on that, David can fill you in on the extremely successful sales results.
Right, I'll just chime in real quick if you'd like. First, as Carol mentioned, the principal amount that was borrowed is about the same as last year. And that's because we paid down. This was the first time you've paid down portion of the sales tax 2, the Phase 4 program. And it worked out to be the same time you were doing the first early out borrowing for Phase 5. So those two kind of offset each other. In the next financings, the financings next year, we will pay down a significant portion of the Phase 4 program. Anyway, as far as the sale, just for context, last year the interest rate was about 1%, just under 1%, 0.992%, which was very good. This year the interest rate, it varied for each of the pieces of the financing, but the interest rates on the actual bands were about 0.1%, and the all-in, which includes all costs and all the various expenses, the fully loaded cost, kind of like an APR on a mortgage, was 0.2%. That's 0.2. So extremely low. The money is almost free, which is helpful because every dollar, you think about it in the context of the sales tax program, every dollar you don't pay in interest is another dollar that's available for projects towards the end of the program. So congratulations on that. And we expect similar results as we move through the financings later in the year. We'll take any questions. I don't know if we covered everything you wanted on.
This is Kent. Kudos. Congratulations on a great all-in outcome. The small portion that's taxable, obviously it's not enormously impactful in today's environment, but what keeps us from being able to transition that to being non-taxable to get a better rate in the future?
That is a result in tax law. I guess it's been, David, what now, three years ago, there were some changes in the tax law that no longer allow you to do a tax exempt advance refunding. And what an advance refunding is where you're issuing bonds to pay off another series of bonds, but that redemption won't be for more than 90 days after the issue date. So it's all tied to your callable date, your redemption date. And so you would think that would more or less foreclose on any sort of redemptions for interest rate savings, but taxable rates are so much lower, so that what we did in 2020, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but in 2020 we issued taxable bonds to basically pay off a portion of the 2013B tax exempt bonds. And so even though, you would think taxable, the rates are going to be so much higher, we did that truly for a cost savings. And then another another twist in the tax law is once you're issuing as taxable debt, we can't then do tax exempt bands to make the payments on the taxable bonds. But even the taxable portion, the interest rate or the true interest cost for the taxable series of bands was 0.13%, and that was compared to 0.92% last year. And so really the difference between the taxable Series D and the tax exempt Series B and C for the sales tax issues, they were both at 0.11%. And actually one was at 0.12% and the taxable was at 0.13%. So being tax exempt would have saved you a couple of basis points, but awfully close.
And it will always be that a pretty small piece. The November piece will be a little bit bigger, like 10 million of the total, or maybe it'll be larger. I forget the exact number. The other thing to keep in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, is once we get past 2023, this piece will no longer need to be taxable. So it's just these couple of years, and we could go through all the arcane tax rules if you'd like. Actually, Carol could, I can't. But the bottom line is we only have to do that through 2023.
That's right, because
that's all I was looking for. Yeah, that's great.
Those
That's
2000.
what I was looking for, the window for when you can get it out. So that's great news. And again, excellent execution.
Right.
Carol, were you saying something that you need to finish?
All I was going to say was that David was correct that the 2013 B, the bonds we were refunding, those are subject to redemption in 2023. And the same thing with there's some 2014 bonds out there that depending on where the market goes, we may later this year, possibly next year, do the same thing where we do a taxable redemption. But those refunding bonds and the bands would only be taxable up until the call date of the 2014 bonds, which would be 2024. So we're just looking at a small window, short window of issuing taxable debt, so that we're okay even if rates do start going up.
Any other questions from either any board members that are on the call or any of the Audit and Finance Committee members? Okay, this is brought to us for information, so we don't need to take any action. But David and Carol, thank you for your continued work on working with us on this, and we'll probably see you in a few months. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
The next agenda, Don, did you have any follow-up on that? The next item is the risk assessment update, and I think we have someone from Elliot Davis.
Yes. So last fiscal year, the district contracted with the audit firm Elliot Davis to do an overall district-wide risk assessment. They looked at a number of functional areas, and based on the assessment that they accomplished, put together a recommended audit schedule based on the level of risk in a specific area, plus the availability of staff to actually conduct the audit. And so for this current fiscal year, we contracted with the firm to conduct 2 internal audits, one in procurement and one in information technology. They're pretty much completed the work in the procurement and a little bit more left to do in IT. This afternoon, they're going to present primarily the results of audit from procurement, and then they come back at a later date for the IT results. So with that, I'll turn it over to the audit firm. I think we have three of the folks online. One of the principals with the firm, Breet, the audit manager, Zach Harmer, and then senior auditor, Earl Oxman. So I'll turn it over to Elliot Davis.
Great. Thank you, Don. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My name's Jay Breet. I'm a principal and I lead our digital risk services practice, which includes our outsourced internal audit. As Don mentioned, about a year ago, we did the risk assessment and developed the audit plan. This year, we picked two of the audit areas, and I've got Zach Harner and Earl Oxner here to kind of walk through the results of the contracts and procurement and just give you a quick update on the information technology one as well. So I'll turn it over to Zach to kind of go through this presentation. It's not that long, but I think there's some really good information in here. So Zach.
Thanks, Jay, and good afternoon, everybody. Is everybody able to see my screen? Great. Well, as Jay mentioned, Jay, Earl, and I have been working closely on these two internal audit work streams. Included our contact information in this slide, which should be distributed along with the deck should anyone have any questions or reach out after this meeting. Wanted to quickly provide an overview of our internal audit process. Kind of 4 phases of the internal audit process, just to give some of those on the call some context into what we've done on these 2 work streams so far. Kind of the discovery process with the process walkthroughs and collaborative meetings with stakeholders, moving into testing of design and operating effectiveness of the controls in place to ensure compliance with code and addressing process level risks, development of the draft internal audit report and any findings or best practice recommendations as a result of our audit procedures. And finally, presenting that draft report and getting responses to those findings or recommendations from all stakeholders involved in the process, both the departments being audited and working closely with finance. Finally, issuing a final internal audit report. First off, I'll just kind of give a high-level overview of the IT internal audit that's currently in process. We are about 85% complete with that, and as Don mentioned, we're hoping to wrap that up and issue a final report here in the next month or so and report out on that potentially at the next meeting. Scope of that included some IT general controls and IT application controls related to Munis. While it's considered the IT internal audit, we've also been working closely with business intelligence related to those controls around Munis, working with both Matt Jordan and then of course Tom Naraki. And we really appreciate the help and guidance and kind of buy-in from both of them. They've been hugely helpful so far. Really just want to wrap up testing here in the month of June and discuss any findings and recommendations and issue that final report here in June or early July. Any questions on that work stream before I move into contracts and procurement? Great. So spend the bulk of my time this afternoon discussing the contracts and procurement internal audit. We're sitting at about 95% complete on this one, substantially complete. The draft report has been communicated to finance and to Wayne in procurement, and the findings and recommendations have been discussed. So really, as soon as we get any feedback or proposed changes to that report, we will be able to issue a final audit report for this one. The scope of this really concerned this current fiscal year, starting July 1st through a cutoff point of February 28th, given the start of our field work. We focused on new procurements through a variety of bid types, emergency, sole source procurements, things of that nature. We also looked at existing contracts and current fiscal year expenses associated with those. We looked at vendor management, ongoing monitoring, onboarding due diligence, offboarding. And then at a high level, we looked at governance and oversight of the overall procurement process across the district and how that might intertwine with different departments and things of that nature. And a summary of the overall audit here. Our overall audit rating for this one is satisfactory with recommendations. We've got a legend in the appendix of this presentation that kind of goes over the rationale and the definitions of each of our audit ratings. And then in terms of results, testing results, there were 15 total findings and recommendations, 3 medium risk, 1 low risk, and then 11 best practice recommendations. So I'll jump into the findings in a bit more detail, broken out by audit area, and then cover the best practice recommendations at a high level very quickly, because there are a number of those, but they should all be distributed for anyone that has any questions or would like to read through them in a lot of detail. So this table really just breaks down kind of where our findings and our recommendations were by audit area. These first 6 were really mapped to that new procurement portion of our testing, which was the bulk of our testing, and had 3 findings related to new procurements or new bids within the current fiscal year. We had a low risk finding related to competitive sealed bids, a medium risk finding related to sole source procurements, and 1 medium risk finding related to known unauthorized purchases or procurements. Kind of in that second bucket of existing contracts and current fiscal year expenses related to those existing contracts and vendors, we had 1 medium risk finding related to those and a contract there. And then the bulk of our best practice recommendations, as you can see, were related to vendor management and governance and oversight. There weren't necessarily specific control deficiencies in design or operating with those audit areas, but more based on our firm's knowledge and experience, some things that the district may want to consider putting in place within those areas. I'll jump into the detailed findings here, and please stop me if you've got any questions about specifics. Again, our contact information is on the slide should you want to reach out and have specific questions later on. Our first finding here is related to competitive sealed bids. For one of the 8 bids that we selected in our sample, we noted that the district did not notify bidders of the award the same day that notice of award was posted to the district website, which was not in compliance with the procurement code. As you can see, this will also be included in the final report. Management's response to the exception, concurred with the exception. For this one, we noted the risk rating was low, and the definitions of those ratings, again, are in the appendix of this presentation. And we just recommend that the district implement a formal checklist or in addition to the current bid documentation, just highlighting those requirements and ensuring that those are followed. Moving quickly to the second finding here around sole source procurements. For one of the 9 sole source procurements that we selected in our sample for this fiscal year, we noted that the checklist did not provide sufficient reasoning and background as to why a sole source was selected. And as you can see, there was a management response there related to the sole source procurement in question. And our recommendation would be that the district enhance these sole source checklists just to ensure that there's sufficient facts and reasoning to support that selection. Risk rating here was medium, largely just because if it was a large dollar value contract, this one was not. But if it was, there's the potential that something could be sole source when the more appropriate method might be a sealed bid or proposal or best value bid, something of that nature. Moving into our third finding around known unauthorized procurements. Per the code, there's a checklist and documentation required requires facts and circumstances surrounding the unauthorized purchase, corrective action taken to prevent reoccurrence, action taken against the individual committing the acts, and then the price paid for that non-authorized procurement was reasonable and fair. And in our testing for one of the 4 selected in our sample, we noted that 2 of these elements were not present in the checklist and the related documentation there, specifically the corrective action taken and the action taken against the individual committing the act or making the unauthorized purchase. Management's response, of course, here was that those actions had been performed, but not properly documented in the confines of the checklist. And given kind of the situation here and unauthorized purchases, we gave the risk rating of medium. And we'd recommend that there's a formal management review to validate that those procurements and those remediation documents contain the required documents per the code. And based on our conversations with Wayne and his response, there's a monthly review now in place going forward of that file to ensure compliance. Last finding here was around district expenditures or current fiscal year expenses with existing vendors. We selected 24 vendors in our sample, and for one of them, there was no formal contract in place for legal services. And based on our conversations and procedures with Wayne and review of documentation, there was no input by the procurement department for this particular contract. It was entered into by the legal department without the oversight of the procurement department. And so given that that kind of was routed outside of the standard procurement process and was not documented in compliance with code, we give that a risk rating of medium. And our recommendation here is that just all contracts entered into by the district for goods and or services were procured in compliance with the code and looped in under the oversight of the procurement department. And I'll quickly go through these best practices. There's 11 of them, so I won't spend a lot of time on each one. Again, feel free to stop me if you have questions. Really, these were just small recommendations related to some things that we found that maybe didn't rise to the level of a finding, but we found could maybe improve the overall processes, efficiency, communication amongst departments. So for competitive sealed bids, we'd recommend that the purchase order dates listed as the anticipated contract start date on the notice of award, just to clearly demonstrate compliance with code. For district expenditures, we'd recommend that at minimum vendor contracts and amendments are stored in Munis. So it's easier to reconcile contract terms with invoice amounts and purchase orders to ensure that the district's paying and receiving what they contracted for. In the vendor management audit area, we'd recommend that the district develop and implement a district-wide vendor management policy or procedures manual, which would cover both new and existing vendors. And we'd recommend considering including onboarding, monitoring of contract requirements and SLAs, and offboarding as part of this policy or these procedures. We'd also recommend an annual vendor review for a selection of critical vendors to kind of ensure that the monitoring of contract requirements and SLAs or other contract terms and continued vendor due diligence for critical vendors that are important to the district. Lastly, in vendor management, we'd recommend that the district identify and implement a vendor or bid management software solution, whether that's utilizing the module in Munis or utilizing another software solution to reduce some of the manual aspects of the current process. We noted that many of the contracts and bid documents were saved on a shared drive, which we didn't note any major manual errors, but the potential for manual error is there, and a lot of it's manually logged. And overall, the department's doing a great job of logging that. It's just the system is manual. So we'd recommend using software if available. And then the last grouping of these would be around governance and oversight, really mostly around policies and procedures. We recommend developing and implementing a district-wide procurement policy aligned to the code that states the procurement department's authority, and including authority, approval authority, roles and responsibilities of other district stakeholders, including other departments, the board, and the superintendent. And then reference to a procedures manual, which leads into our second recommendation here, that would define processes for stakeholder compliance, say other department compliance with the code, such as how to initiate a request for new goods or services via Munis, the associated required reviews and approvals, how to properly define the scope of work, goods, or services for inclusion in a proposal and bid documentation, and the timing for doing that, and then acceptable and unacceptable practices for other departments' involvement in the bid process. And then lastly, we'd also recommend developing an internal procurement department desktop procedure manual aligned to the code to drive code compliant behavior amongst the department, and then ensure continuity in case of employee turnover or department growth, so that there are new employees coming on, that process is clearly documented aside from the regulations in the code. Last couple here, we recommend implementing a standard naming convention that aligns with each procurement type per the code. So that can be used to tie to vendor information, requisitions, purchase orders, invoices in Munis. Currently, there's kind of a number of different naming conventions, and I think that's in process, but just so everything ties together. And kind of as a stopgap until a software solution is in place, we'd recommend implementing a periodic review of the shared drive to make sure that all bid documentation is retained to comply with the code. And last one here, we'd recommend that root cause analysis is performed for each protest by a bidder, and to incorporate any findings of those root cause analyses into future procurements and bid documentation. So I know that was a lot of me talking. Happy to answer any questions about those findings, about either of the work streams, about any of their recommendations. Really appreciate Wayne's help throughout the process. He's been a great partner for our team, and really appreciate the work that Tom and Matt Jordan are doing on the IT audit in progress as well.
Zach, is it fair to say that based on what you've written in management's response, would you characterize these as sort of normal course findings?
Yeah, I would characterize all of our findings as fairly standard. That's a great question. I think in each case within the sample that we selected, there was only one finding out of the entire sample. It wasn't a theme. So, I think that kind of drives the overall audit rating of satisfactory with recommendations, rather than say, a needs improvement audit or something different. So I think those kind of one-offs support the overall audit rating.
Thank you.
So what did your population look like that you were sampling from?
So we took different populations depending on the bid type. So for competitive sealed bids, we had one population, and we selected the sample based on our firm's methodology and risk rating there. and some were larger or smaller than others. I think for emergency procurements, I don't believe there were any for this year, but for small purchases, of course, there were large populations and we took larger samples as a result. So I hope that answers your question. It varied by type of procurement and type of expense.
Yeah, I was just looking for, say, a number, say for small purchases, what was the total population that you started from, that you sampled from?
So if we sampled 4, they were less than 12. I don't think for small purchases it was that large. I'd imagine small purchases it was over 400. I can get you the detailed populations if you'd like. Certainly happy to provide that offline.
Yeah. Thanks.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Why don't you pull it as
No.
close as you can if that.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yes.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay, I was just asking, were there any repeat findings from any previous audits?
So we considered the findings from the annual external procurement audit in the scope of our work and our testing. But in terms of previous internal audits, to our knowledge, in the last couple of years, there has not been a separate internal audit that overlapped with the scope of this current one. And that's speaking specifically to the contracts and procurement work stream.
Yeah, and Zach, you would say, I mean, I think you would characterize the audit, the findings that you did review were all remediated. We didn't find repeat findings based on that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm new. I'm new to this process, to this committee. Is this an audit that's done annually? What's the frequency of your procurement audits?
So I think it would depend on the 3-year internal audit plan. So I think as Jay mentioned very early on in the presentation, we did a risk assessment and developed a 3-year internal audit plan back last spring, early summer of 2020. As a result of that, there were residual risk ratings of each department or audit area that would drive frequency of the audits. And so I believe, again, I can get you this detailed information or distribute a copy of last year's risk assessment. But I believe this was tagged as, recommended every 12 to 18 months for an internal audit around procurement. But ultimately that's at the discretion and up to the district to decide priority.
Good afternoon, Ms. Stamps. This is Wayne Wilshire here. The frequencies of our audits has been every year. The procurement codes requires us to have an audit at least every 3 years, but here since I think like 2011, we've been having them annually.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from committee members? If not, thank you.
Oh, Joyce,
Yes.
this is Kristen French. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Harner, there are a couple of questions I had. One was the governance best practices that you recommended. Do your services include helping the district to identify a model policy or other model practices that could help us structure this well so that we do the best job possible? And I'm also asking as policy liaison because I might be involved in that process.
So, thank you. That's a great question. Jay, I defer to you on this one. I believe the current believe the current scope of this work does not include any development of policies or guidance with policy, but Jay, maybe you can address that a little bit better.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, the way this project or this arrangement's laid out, we're performing internal audit functions. So we're coming in and assessing where you've got gaps. We're providing recommendations and as part of the recommendations, we can, give you guidance around the policies and procedures. It would be, from an independence perspective, it would be tough for us to create your policies and procedures and then come back and audit those down the road. But we can provide examples and work with you to develop the policies and procedures and give you our thoughts and recommendations around those best practices. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I can see where there could be some conflict of interest if we didn't handle it appropriately.
Right. We want you guys to have the best policies, procedures, controls in place that make sense for the organization. And so we're not going to leave you out hanging out to dry to figure it out for yourself. But we just have to be careful with what we create and develop for you.
Well, perhaps some resources would be good, a resource list.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the audit team has identified those areas. So then I think the actual services to develop these policies and procedures should be done by another independent group outside of the audit entity.
Hello, this is Wayne Wilshire again. I think I can add something that Don and I have been reviewing the Council of Great City Schools best practices, which I've been looking at prior to the risk assessment to implement some of those best practices, which I can share with the group.
That sounds good. Thank you.
If you have another question.
One question, I was also concerned about the sampling. I noted that you said 1 in 4 unauthorized purchases that you reviewed wasn't documented correctly, it turns out. But if that was a small sample size of 4, does that reflect a 25% incidence rate? I just need to understand that better.
So the sample size is driven by the overall population and our firm's audit methodology and sample methodology. So that population, which I can get if anyone requests, I believe it was in the 5 to 12 range. I believe it was 8 known unauthorized procurements within the audit period, the current fiscal year up to February 28th. And it was 1 instance. So it wouldn't in that case represent a 25% non-compliance rate. It would represent 1 in 8, so 12.5 in this instance. But the kind of the control or the element of the code that was violated and the dollar value impact were also kind of considered in how we rated that risk.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of Zach or Jay? If not, thank you guys for the work you do, and thank you for the recommendations. And I'm sure that over the next few months that we will be looking at these recommendations and trying to put in practice some of the suggestions that we brought to the audit. So thank you very much.
And thank you everybody on the call. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present, and we look forward to continuing to work with the district.
Okay, Don, you have any follow-up on that?
Well, First of all, thank you to Elliot Davis for the work that for the district. Just like any one of the important in part of the plan is that we made that cover the cost. I will work with the staff.
Excuse me, is it just me? I can't understand what Mr. Kennedy is saying.
So I think we'll check it on the body now. But I will work with reading staff to make sure that we have plans in place to.
Still can't understand him.
Does everybody have any problems understanding Don, or is it just? Can y'all let us know?
I think it's the speakers in the same room. It's just a little muffled.
Pardon?
I think it's the people that you and Don, that you guys that are in the same room. I think the volume just sounds muffled.
Okay. Do you think it's, may have something to do with the mask? I think I'll think that would help.
It's more than the mask. Earlier, the sound changed just momentarily, and I could hear Mr. Kennedy very clearly, but then it went back to this low volume where it sounds like a mic across the room is picking him up instead of the mic near his voice, his face.
So what about now?
Yeah, they're working on
That's better. It's just providing feedback now.
Todd, do you want me to move up a floor box? Do you know which one he is? Just turn him. I can't. I actually can't mess with these. All right. I'm not unblast anybody. Try again.
Let's try now.
Mr. Kennedy.
Is this better?
I think so.
Better.
It's better enough where you can actually hear me, or is
Yes.
it
Yes.
slightly better?
We mute you, Dawn.
All right, so. Just briefly, as we move on with the findings, I will work with the staff in this case, with Wayne, he have already worked on determining that how we will correct the findings and implement best practices. And we bring that to our findings program.
Okay. Any further questions on the risk assessment? Now we'll move on to item 6, which is the 2023-28 capital programs. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Green. This item is the budget detail of the $15 million for the Phase 5 early out projects. Is there any questions?
I had questions on your report, but I mean, I can call you for that technology stuff. Now, I just needed some clarification because I wasn't clear
I can't hear Miss Green.
on. I'm not talking to anybody but Donna. Does anybody have any questions? I'll get with Mr. Sherman and ask my questions. Does anybody have any questions on the capital program, Phase 5? Not the new, right?
Yes, I have one question. Phase 5 includes an unfunded project for middle school, high school in Allendale. And apparently we're moving forward to try to purchase some land for it, but I don't see it anywhere in the budget from the first reading.
Dr. French, though, first, the wave 1 of the phase 5 building program does not include that project you identified.
This is Jeff Broy. This is simply the breakdown of the $15 million that the board has authorized to begin this year out of wave 1. So that project, Dr. French, is not on this list.
I know the whole project's not on the list. I'm talking about the land purchase.
Yes, ma'am. That's not the agenda item. I'm sorry.
All right.
I think one of my questions was, the early out budget. Can one of y'all just kind of enlighten me a little bit as far as that terminology? I think I understand it, but I just want to make sure.
We missed the question, Ms. Green. We can't understand it.
For the early out budget, can you just tell me?
Ooh. Terrible feedback.
Jeff, can you hear me?
It's not coming through, Di. I can hear you talking, but I can't understand.
Let's do this. I'm going to turn off the sound in the boardroom. And if you will each, whoever's speaking, just unmute your computer. Unmute the computer. Keep your computer on. I can't, it's at the mid-range here. I don't know how to turn it down any further. Let's try one more time.
BJ, can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit, Ms. Green.
I will call you with my question, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on that particular item? If not, we will move to the District 2 bus lot construction.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Green. This item is a budget reallocation for our District 2 bus lot. We ran into some unforeseen conditions, and this is correct that.
And this is an action item, so if there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve the budget reallocation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Orange Grove Elementary Charter School.
Thank you, Ms. Green. This is concerning the Orange Grove Charter. The conversion was approved by the Board of Trustees back in 2006. So all we're doing is updating the terms of these facility use agreements. We currently have a middle school operating in one of our facilities for Orange Grove and an elementary school operating in a separate facility. Based on prior board approval, we are requesting that we extend the Orange Grove Elementary Charter for an additional 10-year extension on the facility use agreement. That is concurrent with the length of their current charter renewal. We are also asking for a 5-year facility use extension for the middle school. And that was actually approved back in October 24th, 2016 by the Board of Trustees to extend that to the 2025-2026 school year. So the motion we're putting forward is actually to approve both of these facility use agreements effective July 1 for 2021, and to direct staff only to come back to the board if there is any significant changes to these facility use agreements.
Any questions for anyone?
Move to approve.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. transportation report, Mr. Lynch.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to present the April 2021 data for transportation. As of April 30th, 21, First Student had a total of 432 drivers for 386 routes. April 20, total driver count information is not available due to COVID school closure. For lost instructional time, we're able to attribute 360.7 hours of lost instructional time due to buses being late in the month of April. The top 3 schools affected were Academic Magnet, Lambs, and Northwoods Middle School, with 212 hours, 41, and 33 hours, with the top 3 reasons being primarily traffic, driver-related, and/or substitute driver or lack of driver. This report is based on a total of 54 entries in our late bus log. Overall, the driver count on a monthly basis for First Student continues to be right where we want it to be. They averaged 112% versus the number of routes that they had to cover. And overall, for a year to date, they're averaging about 111%. And that is all I have for transportation. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Lynch? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For these positive reports on transportation. The IT steering committee. Tom, are you on?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Green. Good afternoon. We're here to present the April 22nd, 2021 IT Steering Committee minutes. We started off, first of all, with some great news. We had to brag on our capital accounting team for a great sales tax audit. So that was some good news to share. Mr. Duke shared with us some ransomware experience that he recently went through, kind of what that was like, and gave us some pointers on what to look for. And that was a good piece of information. The state had offered to provide extra bandwidth for all of our school circuits. So we took advantage of that offer, and we doubled the amount of internet bandwidth that each school has out to the internet now. So you can see there's a list of how many schools went from 100 megabits to 250 megabits all the way down to our high school. Some of them went from a gigabit to 2 gigabits. And that's really great. It's helping out a lot. So our cost share is about $3,000 a month, and we're hoping to pay for that with some savings from another project. Comcast redundancy. Comcast and I entered into an agreement where they provided fiber optic cable into every one of our school buildings. All of that external underground work has been done, and almost all the schools now have a Comcast circuit, internet circuit in their school. The idea behind this is that if our main internet line goes out, the schools will never lose phone service and at least basic emergency internet access. We don't have enough to cover the entire school for the teachers and students, but we at least have the redundancy now to keep major systems up and operational. So that's pretty exciting. We're rolling out those now. For cybersecurity awareness, we've joined a couple different groups, and I'm really happy to announce that we just now, last week, hired a virtual information security officer. We've had a vacancy for an FTE for almost 3 years now, trying to find a good qualified IT security specialist. We found a couple, but just the price range that they were coming in at just never was a match, and we lost quite a few that way. So I was able to locate the immediate past South Carolina Department of Education Chief Information Security Officer. He left the state and is now in the public sector, and I've hired him as a contractor, as a virtual ISO. So you can see here his details or his duties are going to be about 80 hours a month, and he's going to be doing constant monitoring of our NIST auditing items. These are the things that we just talked about, or what we're going through now with our internal audit. So he's going to be looking at all of our internal systems and programs. He is also going to be responsible for hiring third-party companies to purposely try to penetrate our network from the inside out and from the outside in. And we're doing everything we can from the security standpoint to protect ourselves and the district. We talked about Google. Up until now, Google for Education has been free, and we've been getting unlimited access to the cloud for storage for Google Documents, Google Drive, and Gmail. And in July of next year, they're going to start charging for that space. So we talked about ways to somehow recoup some space. And these are just some totals that you've got, that we actually have 68,000 suspended accounts. The reason that they're suspended is because if we delete them after 90 days, all of their records will be permanently deleted from Google. And by state retention laws, we have to keep those. So we're working on writing some policies for new retention periods for us, so that we can delete some of those older records and get rid of some student records as well that we may not need. So we're hopefully going to free up quite a bit of space, because right now we're spending money to buy storage for stuff that's 15 and 16 years old. So we're working hard on that. And then we found out that we have about 99.99% uptime for the Google Workspace for our teachers. So that's great. And another exciting thing is I don't know how to explain this. We have IP addresses that you've heard about, an IP address for your phone or for your computer. And back in the 80s, CCSD signed up for a block of IP addresses to carry the district for however long we had networking. And somehow they got a huge block of numbers. And I found a way to dispose of them. So we did an RFP through a procurement. Mr. Welcher helped me through this. And we're selling a sampling. Those, when it says 2/20s, that's 8,000 IP addresses. We have a total of 64,000 that are available for sale. There are brokers on the commercial market that are buying these now for data centers, for AWS, and for Google. They're worth about $25 to $26 a piece. So next week, we're going to be going through the responses of the RFP and decide whether or not we want to keep just that small piece for right now, or go for it and sell all of them in the big block and possibly make some more money. So that could be potentially a little over $1 million when we're done, of money that was not expected. We talked about the committee member replacements. We thanked all of our members for their service, and we kind of went back through our charter, and we invited all of our current members to stay and to apply, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I know we're going to an executive session to talk about that. So our systems update, for the redundancy that I talked about, we have to find a way to keep that that circuit safe on the internet, just like we do our main line. So we had to buy some firewalls that will now immediately fail over if the main one drops out or is cut. It will automatically fail over. So we found some relatively inexpensive pieces, and we got some good engineers on that, and found a way to keep that up, hopefully without anyone having to do anything. So the voice over IP project, with the committee's help, we had some good outside recommendations for getting rid of those old phone systems. We've talked about that before. We had a full-blown PBX in every single school. So now we're going to be pulling all those out, and we're going to be putting in IP phones, which means that they're just like a computer, and that the teacher can log in anywhere and have their personal phone number follow them. So we've got about 1,500 phones right now in the warehouse. Tomorrow, we're cutting over Jane Edwards as our first one. So we got our fingers crossed that that's going to go smooth. Principal Logan is excited. We've been working with her. We were also working hard to make sure that we comply with the E911 service and Carrie's and Raybaum's law. For E911, we've got it right now so that we can at least get them to the front door of the building, which is by law what we're required for. But we're working now to where, hopefully, once we get the whole thing implemented, now we can focus down and we can actually get the first responders to the classroom. That's our goal. But right now we have them at least for E911 getting under the front door. For risk management, we're focusing, as I said, with our virtual ISO on the risk management. Really trying to get central management for all of our devices so we can push updates, we can push patches, we can receive notifications from some of our hardware that's constantly polling for holes and penetrable instances. So our syslog servers, meaning every time someone hits the enter key, we have something logging all of that information. We're now up to almost 30 days of logs, where most places only have 7 days. And now we're getting software that's combining all of these logs together and showing us patterns. For our IT customer support, I've got a great team there as well. Help desk, it's a little bit slow right now. They're averaging about 200 calls per day. In about a month and a half or 2 months, they're going to end up about 900 calls per day. So now's their time to do training, and they're really doing a great job. So the summer work, we've got opening of West Ashley Center for Advanced Studies. So that is already going. We've got the network up and running. We've got other systems that are going in right now. We're working with the school to get all the new computer programs online and do some exciting things there. So student devices right now, for all intents and purposes, we are basically one-to-one. Every student has a device to use, and every principal has a decision whether or not they want to send them home or if they want to have them sign them out. But every student now does have a device. So we're able to take some of the old student computers that aren't being used often, but also aren't on enough to be patched. We're going to be collecting those devices. And also because where students are one-to-one, school principals are asking to eliminate some of the computer labs with the big, 30 computers on tables in a room. They want to use it now for a collaborative teaching space or an extra classroom. So we're able to remove those PCs. So our lifecycle management costs will go down. Our IT risk footprint will be a little bit smaller because we have fewer devices on the network that could be potentially unpatched or unmanaged. We're replacing about 12,000 Chromebooks this summer. So that's pretty exciting. We really don't have any supply issues worldwide. There's a major supply issues with chips. I'm sure you heard with the car manufacturers and everyone else with chips. We just happened to get our order in on time. We have some good sales teams. The students can use Apple iPads and the Chromebooks. And right now our biggest struggle is Apple has a new processor. They decided to not use the Intel anymore, and they have their dedicated processor, which is causing us some problems because a lot of website developers did not specifically develop their app or their website to interact with that particular processing system. So it is very proprietary, and we're having to do a lot in training and research on that. Promethean panels, after 5 years, we're finally installing the last school, and every single school by the end of summer will have a Promethean board, and then we get to start all over again. So we're excited about the sales tax program. That's really been a godsend for us. Schools are really starting to use the boards more, especially in the virtual learning. And from there, we just kind of went once around. We talked about some vacancies that we have and how hard it is to fill those vacancies. We're having some very good luck because HR stepped in to help us and help us adjust the pay scale for some of our positions. So that really, really helped out a lot. And we're hoping to fill those vacancies soon. So we gave a certificate to all of the Oversight Committee members that were there. We just bought some nice frames and gave them a certificate. It was little to nothing, but at least we wanted to say thank you. I really enjoy this committee. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate the way that Mr. Duke is allowing it to just be kind of dynamic and just let discussion happen instead of a presentation. So we're really, really glad about that. And our summer focus, Comcast circuit installations, and we talked about the IP phones, the virtual security. We're going to get started really hot and heavy next week. New building readiness, and then talking about renovation readiness and how we can get into renovations and still make sure that we're doing our job for that piece as well. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions of Tom? I had one question regarding the replacement phones.
Yes, ma'am.
What's going to happen to the current phones that we have? I mean, is there like a secondhand sale, a possibility to get to make some money on the sale of the current phones?
Absolutely, ma'am. So all of our network equipment now, we did an RFP for a secondary market. So we put it out and we get bids on those devices. So we're going to do an RFP for the phone systems themselves. The phones probably aren't worth anything, but the phone systems and some of the hardware is valuable. And we're going to do an RFP so that we can add that to our contract and get bids for those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Some good things going on there, Tom. Thanks for your work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, The next item on the agenda is the Phase 5 construction. Jeff, Mr. Barori.
Yes, ma'am. Back in April, the Board of Trustees directed us to do a safety assessment of the unfunded projects in Phase 5. This is brought forward as an action item for your approval. The second page of the document shows the list of unfunded projects. The district staff, which included facilities management, capital programs, and security and emergency management, evaluated each of the projects based on 3 general conditions. One was the seismic situation at the building itself, whether or not the campus had existing trailers, which the trailers themselves present less of a less safety support as a primary building, and then overall campus safety. As you can see, 2 of the 3 projects that we had recommended for 8% funds, Phase 1 of AC Cochran and Deer Park expansion, had 2 check marks. Mary Ford also had 2 check marks. We did not recommend that project be brought forward. We've invested a little over $4 million in the last 2 years into that facility for HVAC, flooring, painting, bathrooms, playgrounds, furniture, and it is a $30 million project. And we thought that would be best served to hang fast where it is right now on the unfunded list. Although Midland Park land didn't score very high, it is a very small dollar amount. So the bottom line is we're still recommending that 3 projects be brought forward for 8% funding approval. Phase 1 of AC Cochran, the expansion of Deer Park, and the land at Midland Park.
Any questions of Jeff? This is like deja vu, right? Does anybody have any questions? Don has a comment. Okay.
Yeah, so when this was brought before the committee and the board earlier this spring, we also had the how the finances would play out. So by adding these 3 additional projects back in, the financial numbers still remain the same as they were back in the spring. So the total amount of the 4 projects would be $77.5 million. Be financed through 8% debt capacity, which would go into the debt service. The millage would not increase; it would remain at 28, and then we would still be on track to expire the GO debt in 2032, including if we added the $77.5 million at 28 mil.
Thank you, Don. Any questions from the committee members? If not, may I get a motion to approve the funding of these 3 projects?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Well, I think you can now move forward, Jeff, with these projects. Thank you. So the next on the agenda is the monthly capital projects report. Joyce?
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to present the April capital projects report. I have some fantastic news to report on our revenue collections for the month of March for the 2017-2022 capital building program. We were 2.1 million above our 2% projections that are in our model. So it was a fantastic month and hope that trend continues. The expenditures for the program were $7.6 million. For phase 3, which is the 2010-2016 building program, the expenditures were $12 million. And for capital maintenance, 8% funding, the expenditures totaled $953,000. Our fixed cost of ownership 21 program is in the final months of completion, and we've already begun on our fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 22 projects. Everything's moving forward very nicely.
Any questions? That was good news, Joyce, and we'll just kind of rely on you to bring us good news every month.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, if not, Enrollment update, Don?
Thank you. All districts are required to report to the state the 135-day enrollment numbers that we're required to actually report twice a year, 45-day enrollment number and the 135-day enrollment numbers. So what's being presented to this afternoon are the 135-day numbers. And so in the column here, the third column, it shows the 135-day count by type of a student in the base category over here to the left. And then we compare that 135-day count to the final 135-day count last year, fiscal year 20. And then we also compare the current 135-day count to the 45-day count of the current fiscal year. And so looking at the variances here on this ADM total line here for the 135-day this year, the number is 46,279 ADM students. That is slightly less, just slightly less than the 45-day count for this year. However, this 46,278 is down roughly 600 students from the 135-day for last year. And so we do have some reduction in our ADM counts. And so that's the information I need to present, Ms. Wheaton.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Any questions? Okay, if not, Don, you can continue with the monthly financial report.
Thank you. So I will start with the bottom line. First of all, the report is as of April 30. So this is 10 months into the fiscal year. Only May and June left to report. So the bottom line here is that this column is the variance column, is the estimated year end versus the board approved budget. It shows whether we plan on we're projecting rather to have a revenues over expenditures in a positive vein. And the bottom line here is that we're projecting for as of April 30 that we'll have $22.8 million revenue over expenditures. This is compared to when we presented last month, it was $18 million. So we've gone up roughly $3 million. And that has been driven largely by increases here in revenue. Those increases are highlighted in the footnotes. It's a combination of both local revenue in terms of the ad valorem taxes, plus the collection of delinquent taxes and fee in lieu of taxes. So those are higher than budget, and so therefore we have that $3.3 million. And then on the expenditure side here, we have a number of variances, but when they're totaled up, it's only $815,000 less than last month's report for a net here to add to the $18 million from last month for again a positive number of $22.8 million. And all of these variances are explained in the footnotes. So what questions do you have?
Any questions for Don?
And Donna, the transfer numbers, if I read it right, went up in part because of the change in the head count or the student enrollment number, but that number didn't seem like it changed very much. It's only like 5 students different or 6 students different from. So, am I not following something right, or what's going on?
So that's a good observation. And so it depends on the category of students. So when we take a look at the students in our contract schools or charter schools, their ADM is different than what it was from the prior month. And so that was an adjustment there based on, it's not an adjustment, it's just simply based on the formulas that we use. And then also there's something called the academic, let's see what that is actually called.
Yeah, I forgot about that multiplier effect that your straight numbers don't translate. So that helps. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, Don, thank you. So we are now at the point of the second reading of the fiscal year 22 budget.
Thank you again. So as stated in this background discussion paragraph, what was presented to the committee last month was a 3.4 million increase over the fiscal year 20 budget that was voted on by the first reading by the school board. This presentation today, recommendation today is the same as it was last month, the same 3.4 million increase with revenues and expenditures remaining at the bottom line the same. There were adjustments in the, hold on a second. And so what this table shows here is the audit finance recommendation from last month of the first reading, 3.4 million increase. Revenues and expenditures that were added, the first reading budget book, and then the second reading, which is we're looking at today, 3.4 million increase, which is the same as the first reading. And this variance column here, this first variance column shows that any differences between what was presented to the first reading of the budget book and the second, excuse me, what was presented to the Audit Finance Committee as first reading, and then what was presented at the board, what was voted on by the board for the first reading of the budget book. And those differences, this $449,000 here is related to transportation, contract costs, reductions in that. And so we reduced that expenditure line by the $449,000, and we added $421,000 into this category of communications and strategy requests. This is to show up some of the community engagement outside of the district. And so that's $420,000. And there's a disparity on the disparity study. Through negotiations with the firm, we reduced the expected cost by $19,000, so we reduced that. And so for a net decrease of shift of $401,000, and the difference being between the 401 and the 449 here, 47,600. That simply we reduced the amount of use of fund balance. So the expenditures went down through these adjustments by the 47,600, and so we needed $47,600 less in revenue, and so we reduced the use of fund balance. The variance column to the right here, and you see this shows all zeros, so that means that in net there's no difference between the first reading and the second reading. The other thing I need to share with the committee information on salary adjustments. So if you recall, back in the fall, I think it was October, the committee and the board voted to increase non-teaching salary, the salary for non-teachers to 98% of market for fiscal year 22 and 100% in the following fiscal year. What's recommended from staff in the first reading and as well as the second reading is that we go to 95% of market versus 98%. And that is shown here, this 95% column here. And so what I want to show what the impact is on these 5 categories of employees: so executive director, manager, secretary, bookkeeper, food services operator. And what I want to show here is the percentage increase from fiscal year 21, current fiscal year, to the percentage increase, or the percentage increase would be for the salary adjustments up to 95% of market for fiscal year 22. So starting here with the executive director, with 15 years of service, that category of employee would receive an increase of $4,700, 4.1%, which would put that person at 95% of market. The next one here at 4.3% would be the director at 15 years, a manager at 15 years at 5.1%. The one here at 7%, that would be for a secretary bookkeeper at schools. And then the 8.2% increase would be for a food services operator. So again, these are at 95%, and these percentage increases for fiscal year 22 that's proposed in the budget are in addition to the increases that were not budgeted for the current fiscal year. So if you recall, we applied a step increase for all eligible employees this year to include non-teachers, which only teachers were in the budget for a step increase. And then across the board, we also made a 2% COLA increase. And so trying to take a look at what it would cost to move to 98% and make some other adjustments in the salaries for next year. At the bottom left-hand corner here, if we were to take all non-teachers to 98% of market, it would cost an additional 1.8 mil over the 3.4 mil that is currently recommended, for a total of an additional $5.2 million of expenditures. Another analysis scenario we looked at was to take a look at, well, first of all, I'm going to go here. So our standard COLA increase has historically been a 2% COLA. And so we were to apply 2% cost of living increase for all eligible employees, then that would cost an additional 2.9 mil for $8.5 million. Now, each of these, by the way, is independent of each other. And then there's a third scenario here, that we looked at. When we received the allowance millage from the state Department of Education earlier, a few weeks ago, included in that was only a 1.2% cost of living, 1.2% CPI, Consumer Price Index. So the CPI for Charleston, according to the state, was 1.2%. This is actually from the Board of Economic Advisors at the state level. And so we applied that 1.2% CPI as a COLA for all eligible employees. And to do that, it would take a 1.7 million or additional almost $5 million. So these are the costs for these scenarios to move either to 98%, somewhere closer to 98% market, somewhere closer to that. And compared to where we are right now with these increases. So I'm presenting this as information, not as a change in the recommendation that staff is bringing to the committee. So with that, I would take any questions.
Are there any questions from Mr. Kennedy?
So Don, you presented this as informational, but what would need to occur to act on, for example, the 98% of market adjustment?
So again, you're right. So this is the recommendation from staff. So and for me, it's taking a look at multiple perspectives here, including the impact on the taxpayer, and also trying to understand from the recruitment standpoint the impact on being able to bring additional to recruit and retain staff. And I'm certainly taking a look at the uncertainty of still the uncertainty of the economy at least in the short term. So what it would take would be for a motion by the committee and or a motion by the full board to adopt one of these options, alternatives.
I mean, this is for the committee to discuss, but I have two preliminary thoughts around this. The first is generally speaking, operating across the board at below market is a difficult, puts the district in a difficult position to retain and to attract and then retain the staff that we have and the team that we have to execute the mission of educating our students. So I think operating across the board at below market is a less than ideal strategy. And then secondarily, I think in the current environment, especially as we're seeing across a lot of segments of the economy, that the pressure on wages and the war for talent is going to, I think, make this problem even more acute in the very near term. So I'd be reluctant to not try to act on making an adjustment here at a time when there have been significant strains on our staff and team, and it's a competitive world and trying to keep people. So those are my two thoughts.
I'd like to get some input from the other members of the Audit and Finance Committee. Stephen, Velma, do you have any thoughts? Don't want to put you on the spot, but if you do, I would appreciate you sharing your thoughts about it. Stephen, do you have any thoughts about the potential increase?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, we're going to have to offer, especially when you look at, support services. We see this in IT where, you're competing, for a lot of other companies for IT resources here in Charleston. They're easily, Charleston County School District gives great training. The person stays for a year and then moves on, to get, better pay. So to keep them and keep the resources and keep the expertise that we spend the time on, we do need to increase the pay.
Okay, thank you. Thelma, do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I agree with what's been said. If you want to retain your talent, you have to make your salaries competitive. So if that is the objective, if you just don't want to be the training ground for everybody else, then you need to do what you need to do to make sure you can keep your talent once you train them. Otherwise, we're just a training ground for all the other entities.
Don, Dr. Postaway. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. I overlooked you.
Nope, not a problem. No, I was agreeing with all the comments that have been made, especially Kent. I was nodding while he was talking. If we're doing the analysis right now, is it something we need to consider? But I agree 100% with everything everyone said so far.
Okay. Don, do you have any additional comments? If not, I'll ask for a vote. Okay.
Yeah, I would move that we approve the move to 98% market adjustment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And just to be clear, Don, that will increase the mill by
1.8 mil, so that'll be an additional 5.2 million, so 1.8 mil. So right now we have 3.4, so this we have 1.8 with it, so that's 5.2.
3.4 and 1. Okay. Okay. The next item is an executive session item. And so I'll take a motion to go in executive session to talk about the nominees for the IT steering committee.
So moved.
Second.
So, it will be open to the, and I guess Maggie is gonna let the committee members know what we need to do. Yeah, you just need to join the executive session.
Yes, I'm going to, I'm going to take the boardroom out of open session too.
sounded. I just wondered. It's a big thing though, it probably shouldn't go on percent. We'd have to raise the tax rate even higher than we're planning to. What?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so I will now entertain a motion that we come out of executive session.
I'll make a motion that we recommend the 4 following candidates for selection to the IT steering committee, and those.
Hold on a minute, we need to come out of executive session first. We're already out of executive session. Okay. Just carry on, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. So the 4 members that we make a motion to recommend for the IT steering committee are Doug Lauer, Charles Monteith, Paul Gilson, and John Nelson.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? Thank you. And those 4 members will be taken to the full board for approval, or discussion and approval. And again, Stephen and Tom, thank you for your work on that. I thought it was kind of interesting that we had, I don't know what you usually get in terms of applicants, but I didn't think that was a bad number at all, considering, you know, the work and that kind of thing. So I was pretty pleased to see the number of applicants that we did get.
I'm pretty impressed with the evolution of the IT steering committee since we didn't have one before Stephen joined, and Stephen came to this committee, and then subsequently the IT steering committee was formed, at least as far as I remember. And it's a much more robust oversight than we could possibly manage with our normal finance group. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We have to determine the board agenda items. Don, I still rely on you for that. I've got 4, 5, 6.
So we have 5 action items. District 2 bus lot construction budget reallocation, the Orange Grove Charter School Facility Use Agreement, Phase 5 construction 8% capacity analysis, safety analysis, the second reading of the budget, this fiscal year 22 budget, in the IT steering committee nominee. Those are the action items. And then for information, we have 4 items: risk assessment update, the 2023-28 Phase 5 early out program, the monthly capital projects report, and the monthly financial report.
And so the spring bond anticipation notes doesn't go to the full board?
And so that was just the presented to the committee the results of the bond sale. So the full board's already voted on the to authorize the sale of the sale. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, got all that, Trina? Okay, very good. Any questions, comments from any of the committee members? Dr. Postlewaite, are you on? And if you are, do you have any comments?
I'm on. I just want to thank everyone for the time this afternoon. A lot of work was done in this committee meeting, so thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the next meeting is June 6th and I'm sorry, July 6th. And Velma, I just want to say again, welcome aboard.
So I want to confirm that, I'm sorry. I want to confirm the date for the next meeting in July. So Trina, July 13th, is that right?
Oh, July 13th, okay. Did y'all get that? Committee members, the next meeting is not the 6th, it's the 13th. Is that okay with everyone, hopefully? Okay. All right. Thank you guys for your work, your continued work and working with me as I move into this role a little bit more every month. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.